Okay, we have come to the last lesson in our chapter on time. So we're going to actually go through this a little bit together. So if you would open up your book to page 581, we can look at these word problems together, these math stories to help us figure out the time. We're going to be looking at charts to help us figure out who did what, when, using the information that was given to us. So if you are ready, we can look then at the first problem at the top of this page. It's actually telling us about Nolan, Micah, and Eli. So let's read this together. It says Nolan has a skating lesson at 11 o'clock. Micah has a lesson a half hour before Nolan. Eli has a lesson a half hour after Nolan. Who has a skating lesson at 11:30? I'm going to underline my question because that's what we need to find out. That's our goal. But we have some information they've given us, so we can circle some things. Nolan has a skating lesson at 11 o'clock, so we can circle the 11 o'clock. Micah has a lesson that's a half hour before Nolan, and Eli has a lesson that's a half hour after Nolan. So these are really important in trying to figure out which time to make a chart to fill in that information. So looking at these analog clocks that they're giving us right here, we know the information for Nolan is 11 o'clock. So we know that this is an analog clock that shows the minute hand on 12, hour hand on 11. So this is Nolan's time of 11 o'clock. Micah has a lesson that's a half hour before Nolan. So we have to go backwards 30 minutes. So if we were to do that, we would take our minute hand and bring it all the way back around, going backwards to the 6, which then means my hour hand has to move backwards towards the 10, and it's going to be at half past because that minute hand's on the 6, which tells me that my hour hand didn't make it fully back to the 10 yet. So now I know that Micah had his skating lesson at 10:30. Eli, though, has a lesson a half hour after Nolan. So if it has to come later, it's got to come next. We know Nolan's at 11 o'clock. To go 30 minutes later, our hour hand, I'm sorry, our minute hand first, has to move to our 6, while that hour hand, which was on the 11, goes halfway between 11 and 12, making it 11:30. So then looking at the chart, we can see that Nolan had his skating lesson at 11 o'clock. So they put his name in the center of the chart because here's the when, the time, and the who. We know that Micah had a skating lesson a half hour before. That was 10:30. So we put that time above Nolan's and put Micah's name. And Eli has a skating lesson a half hour after 11, which is 11:30. So there's our digital time for 11:30, and there's Eli's name. For making a chart for the when and the who helps us figure out the question was who has a skating lesson at 11:30? Here's our answer. Eli has a skating lesson at 11:30. So that's what we're going to work on today is using what we know to help us answer these questions on time. So if you would turn to the next page, which is 582, we're going to work on some of these problem solving questions together. So let's look at number 1. And we're going to talk about my friends Kelsey, Kate, and Jasmine. So Kelsey finishes her chores at 4:30. Kate finishes her chores at 5 o'clock. Jasmine finishes her chores at 4 o'clock. Who finishes her chores last? In any word problem or math story, we underline the question, we circle what we know, right? Here's the times that we know. And we also know the names of our friends. So you can go ahead and circle their names too. So you know this information is really important. So we're going to fill out the chart over here in order to figure out who finishes their chores last. So we know that Kelsey finishes her chores at 4:30. So they wrote already, and we can trace over Kelsey for us in this box. It shows Kelsey did her chores at 4:30. So I'm going to go ahead and just trace as quick as I can with my little mark tracer here. Then it says Kate finishes her chores at 5 o'clock. There's my 5 o'clock. So you can go ahead. I'm just going to put K-A for Kate. It's just easier. You guys can go ahead and fill out the whole name for Kate. So we can put Kate for 5 o'clock. And Jasmine finishes her chores at 4 o'clock. I'm putting just a J for Jasmine. You guys could probably fit the whole word Jasmine, so you can go ahead and write that. It would take too long for me to make my little mouse here write the name Jasmine. So now we know, here's the question, who finishes her chores last? Looking in the order, the chart, Kate finishes her chores last. So you can go ahead and trace over Kate on that line. Trying to do it fast, it's only 4 letters. So we have those, that answer there. We have Kate finishes her chores last. So now let's take a look at number 2. And this one, a little trickier than number 1, because we kind of have to use a little bit of the information we know and what we learned to help us answer the question. So let's read about Emma, Sandra, and Brooke. So Emma goes to the playground at 2 o'clock. Sandra goes to the playground 1 hour after Emma. Brooke goes to the playground 1 hour before Emma. Who goes to the playground at 11 o'clock? In all math stories, I know you did it. I know you picked up your pencil and you underlined that question. Circle the name Emma, because we know Emma was 2 o'clock. So here's some information. Sandra goes 1 hour after Emma. Circle the name Brooke and circle that she goes 1 hour before. So now we know this is the information that's important for us to help us figure out. We know the when, now we have to figure out who, when, at which time. So we know Emma goes to the playground at 2 o'clock. So here's the 2 o'clock in our chart for when. So we can go ahead and write Emma's name. I'm just going to put an E for Emma. You go ahead and write Emma on the line. We know Emma goes at 2 o'clock. Sandra goes to the playground 1 hour after Emma. So if she goes 1 hour after, she's going next, the next hour forward. So if it was 2 o'clock, to go next hour would be 3 o'clock. So you can go ahead and put Sandra's name here because Sandra goes at 3 o'clock because she's going 1 hour later. Brooke goes to the playground 1 hour before Emma. So here's 1 hour before would be 1 o'clock. So you can go ahead and write, I'm going to put a B, but you go ahead and write Brooke's name for 1 o'clock. So now who goes to the playground at 1 o'clock? Now that we filled in our chart, we know that Brooke, I'm just going to write the letter B. You go ahead and write the whole name for Brooke on each line. So Brooke goes to the playground at 1 o'clock. So our question, we can talk about, how does reasoning help you solve a problem about time? Well, you can use reasoning, which is kind of figuring out what's happening in a math story, to make a list and put the facts in order. So what we're doing is we're making a chart. By using that chart of a when and a who, we can figure out the answer to our question. So that's why that reasoning is helping us. This is what they're talking about when it says at the top of our page, use logical reasoning. Just means we're going to make a list of who, we're going to make a list of when, so that we can figure out the answer to our question. So let's look at the next page together. So if we are on page 583, well, I don't want to go too far down. 583, they review again. our problem with Nolan, Micah, and Eli, reminding us that Nolan had a skating lesson at 11 o'clock. Micah had a lesson a half hour before, which was at 10:30, and Eli had a lesson a half hour after Nolan, which was 11:30. And then we were able to answer a question that who has a skating lesson at 11:30? Eli has a skating lesson at 11:30. So number one, I'm actually going to let you do that one on your own, but I'm just going to read that problem to you, and then I'm going to leave you to figure that out and put your information in. And then we're going to stop there today on page 583, and we're going to continue with the rest of this lesson on Monday. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a break today. So number one talked about Caleb down here. Caleb makes a craft at 6:30. Ashton makes his craft a half hour before Caleb. When does Ashton make his craft? Don't forget to circle the information you're given. Don't forget to underline the question. And I'm going to let you go ahead and fill in that chart and give that answer. When does Ashton make his craft? You're going to have that answer. You guys did great today. Keep up the good work, and I'm hoping to see a lot of your faces tomorrow. Bye, guys.